only as an officer, but also your integrity and your ability to write.
And for how long did you serve as adjutant?
I think I served for over 1 year, and then eventually I was succeeded by, then I think, if I can remember very well, Captain Ann, and I was posted to Bravo Company as the company commander.
And do you recall which year this occurred?
I think this was, if I can remember, the chronology is a little bit distinct, but I think it was between 91, around 91, and then I think I didn't stay long at as a company commander. I eventually was sent to Pakistan at the School of Infantry in Quetta to do my mid-career course, which was the company commander's course.
What did you do upon your return from Pakistan?
Upon my return to Pakistan, if I can remember, either before or after going to Pakistan, there was a moment whilst I was the commander of Bravo Company when there was a mutiny by some of the soldiers who had returned from Liberia before.
Can you tell us about that mutiny?
Well, the soldiers, I think, had some dissatisfactions about their conditions. I think the claim was that they were promised that they would be paid upon their return a bonus, which I was not aware of, but then they discussed among themselves, and then not all of them, a group of them, decided to do a mutiny, but this was a mutiny without violence. They decided that they were not going to report for their normal duties, and then gathered around the commander's office.
What happened when they gathered around the commander's office?
When they gathered, I think the commander consulted with some of the officers, and then we decided to take them to one of the training rooms, and I think we also invited the then Gendarmerie commander, who was a Major Pasala Jang, and then there was also the British training team. There was a lieutenant colonel, I forgot the name, and one sergeant major, I think, if I can remember, it was Selos. We spoke to them and then told them that that was against the military order, and that if they had any grievances, they should channel it politely, and then it will be adjudicated and dealt with according to the army rules that existed.
Who was the commander of the army at this time?
The commander of the army was Colonel Ndaunjai, Mamadou Ndaunjai then.
Did the soldiers accept or heed to the advice they were given?
No, certainly they didn't. I think after 1 or 2 hours of bantering, some of them decided to bust out of the room, and then some attempted even to rustle some guns from our security deployment, which then, as the company commander in charge, we resisted and then drove them out of the barracks.
What happened after that?
After that, they went to the road from Birkama heading to Westfield. I think they commanded a GPTC bus then, and then headed to Banjul.
Do you know what happened in Banjul when they arrived there?
I think we were able to contain them briefly at the bridge, and then later they were allowed to assemble at the then Makati Square, where the commander of the JN, Den Daunjai, eventually joined them with Pasala Jain, and then went to the presidency. And then after some discussion, they came and then were able to convince them to calm down and then to return to the barracks.
Do you recall the date this event occurred?
Certainly not, but I think it was within the general time. But the exact date I cannot recall. It must be in the historical records. I'm sure you can dig it out.
1990, would it be at around that time?
1990, 91. I'm not very sure, but I think it was a very significant happening. So we can locate the dates very well.
How many soldiers participated in this mutiny?
I think, if I can recall, between 60 to 80, if I can remember.
Were any officers involved?
No, no officer was visible, no officer was mentioned. I think it was led by the non-commissioned officers. The one I can remember then was one Sergeant Drame. And then there was also another Lance Corporal Bojang from Birkama.
Were any disciplinary measures taken against any of these soldiers?
Yes, I think when they eventually were persuaded to come back to their senses, they were brought to Yundum, and then we gathered them around the training pitch. And then after addressing them, we detained some of them and took them to Mile 2.
Why did the army do that?
Well, as I said, mutiny is not part of the business of a soldier. The soldier's lot is to do what he's told. If he has any complaints or any this thing, he can politely make his case within the chain of command, and then I'm sure within the space of the military justice system, if the complaints are genuine, it could be addressed.
Do you recall how many soldiers were taken to Mile 2 prison?
I think not all the 80 were taken. We screened them, and those who were found to be the instigators were taken. And then after that, I think there was a board of inquiry, a BOI, that was set up. If I can remember very well, then Permanent Secretary of Local Government, I think, Mr. Tal, is currently serving, I think, in Nigeria in our mission as the ambassador of the Gambia to Nigeria, was the head of that inquiry.
And what happened to your career in the military after that?
Following that, I was posted to Liberia as the 4th Contingent Commander to take over from, I think, then Captain Abdoulaye Conte.
What did you have to do in Liberia?
In Liberia, I was not only the contingent commander for the Gambian detachment, but I was also a contingent commander assigned by my government to the headquarters of ECOMOG. And I was appointed, my appointment at the ECOMOG, which was reserved for Gambians, was to be the camp commandant of the headquarters, responsible for coordinating the security of the ECOMOG headquarters.
What kind of operation was this?
This was then earlier on, I think the West African states had deployed to Liberia a military contingent to go and try to bring sanity into the then civil war, and then, to make sure that, they facilitate a peaceful environment for negotiation. So my assignment coincided with a brief lull in the Liberian civil war, but it eventually escalated back to a fight.
This was a peace enforcement mission, correct?
Yes, it was a peace enforcement mission, certainly.
And for how long did you remain in Liberia?
I was in Liberia for a better part of, I think, 1 year, 4 months, 6 months, precisely.
And what did you do when you returned?
Upon return to the Gambia, I think after the disembarkation leave, I reported back to Yundum. eventually, I was also nominated to go to proceed to Nigeria to the Command and Staff College at Jaji to do a course as a JD, what we call JD, Junior Division Staff Course.
Do you remember when this took place?
I think the course was about 5-6 months, and then I left the Gambia and returned before end of December 1993.
And what did you do after your return in end of December 1993?
Upon my return, I was posted to the 2 Infantry Battalion, which was then being set up in Farafenye, as a company commander, and also being the most senior captain. I was appointed as the second in command to the then commander, who was a Nigerian Lieutenant Colonel Salik.
And for how long did you stay in Farafenye?
I stayed in Farafenye for, I think, 5 months, because from January, I reported for duties around January. Then by end of June, if I can remember, or thereabout, I was recalled and reposted to the Army headquarters as Staff Officer 2 in charge of operations and training.
You mentioned a Colonel Salik, that you worked under him as the 2IC, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Salik is not Gambian, is it?
Certainly not. He was part of the Nigeria Army Training and Advisory Group, which was earlier contacted by the Gambia government, and through their bilateral relationship with the sister Republic of Nigeria, they were asked to come in and help in the restructuring and the retraining of the then Gambia National Army under the command of Brigadier General Dada.
You telling us that the name of the group was NATAG, N-A-T-A-G, Nigerian Army Training Advisory Group. Apart from training, did the Nigerians carry out any other functions apart from training and advisory function? Did they carry out any other functions?
I think the consequences of the mutiny I earlier mentioned was that after we settled the problem, the then Commander Ndao Njai was redesignated. I think he was posted as the Gambian ambassador to France, and then in the interim, Major Mao Job was appointed as interim commander of the Gambian National Army. And then during that period, it was during that period that the government of the Gambia approached the then government of Nigeria under, if I can remember, General Babangida. And then I think there was an assistance package to the Gambia in the form of a military training and advisory group composed of a high-level senior officers and junior officers and non-commissioned officers under the command of Dada, who was tasked to command, not only to train, but also to command the Gambia National Army.
Do you recall when the Nigerians arrived in the Gambia? What time?
Again, the precise dates were not very clear, but I think either I was out on that posting in Liberia, or certainly I cannot remember precisely the date.
Would you say they were already in position when you returned from Liberia?
Certainly, because whilst I was there, we had a visit by General Dada to the field, which was a usual procedure whenever troops are posted in a conflict zone. It becomes the duty of whoever is commanding them to visit them periodically, to review their conditions and see whether they were properly being commanded and whether the objectives for which they were deployed was being carried out.
Yeah. From your answers, it appears that you're suggesting that the Nigerians also took up command position. Is that correct?
Certainly. Not only were they tasked to train the Gambia National Army, but as you would recall, then when Ndao Njai was appointed as an ambassador to France, I think there was no senior officer early on. Then Colonel Gay, Lieutenant Colonel Modu Gay, was also retired for some reason. And then most of the highest echelon of the Gambian command was a major, which was Major Maba Diop, and then Major Malik Njai. Malik Njai was not a combat regular commission officer. He was a medic, and Maba Diop was briefly appointed as the interim commander. But I think the wisdom of the then government, they felt that there was a need to bring in more mature, if I may use the word, or more seasoned officers to help us through to set up the proper army and establish the proper regimentation that all professional armies will require.
And in that arrangement, the Nigerians also assumed command responsibility for the Gambia National Army. Is that right?
Very well, that is true.
Could you kindly describe to us the levels at which Nigerians were placed as commanders?
I think the position of the commander, Gambia National Army, was a Nigerian. There was also two full-bird colonels, Colonel Awonibi and Colonel Akoji, who were appointed as, one was Colonel G1 and the other was G2. One was responsible for training and operations, the other was responsible for admin and logistics. And then below them, we had the battalion commanders. There were also two Nigerian lieutenant colonels. One was appointed commander of the 1 Infantry Battalion in Yindum. The other was the Colonel Salik I earlier mentioned, was appointed the commander of the then 2 Infantry Battalion in Farafenye. And below them, we had various staff officers, and some of them were lawyers, some of them were doctors, there were other officers who were appointed in the training roles, etc., etc.
How about command of the fighting forces of the troops themselves?
I think if you know the structure of an infantry battalion, which was then made up of 3 infantry companies and 1 what we call an admin company. So the 3 infantry companies made up of 3 platoons. As I said earlier, a company in a normal army is commanded by a captain, a senior captain, or a major. And then the platoons were commanded by lieutenants and second lieutenants. So below the battalion level command, I think we had some Gambians who were fitted into as company commanders and various platoon commanders.
Were there any Nigerians who occupied the positions of company commander?
No, certainly not. Not to my knowledge.
Would you say therefore that the command role of the Nigerians was limited to the battalion level?
Yes, I think their role or the intention of the then political leaders was not to permanently make them commanders of the Gambia National Army. This was a period of transition, which was a difficult one, because I think the Gambia, unlike most of our fellow West African English-speaking countries, disbanded what was created by the British during the Second World War, immediately before independence or after independence. And so we never had a standing army. but a field force which was an armed police detachment under the Gambia Police Force. So that created, a skills vacuum and also a knowledge vacuum in the country on the proper way of commanding and administering a regular army.
And what impact did that historical narrative have on the army as it then was in the 1990s?
Because of the fact that there was no continuity in our army structures, then it means we didn't have officers and non-commissioned officers, to carry on the tradition of soldiering. So when the Gambia National Army was set up in July 94, I think first the government resorted to the British government to dispatch a British Army training team, which was good at the time because they recruited soldiers, inducted them to the army, and supervised the training. Of course, they were also assisted by some officers who were moved from the then Gendarmerie, which was earlier established, and then some NCOs as well. But basically, the doctrine and the supervision of the recruit training was done by the British. So essentially, what it meant was that the Gambia had no capacity, skill capacity, to run a modern army.
Before you continue on that narrative, point of clarification. Did you say that the army was set up in July 94 or you meant 84? Could you clarify that point?
Yes, certainly. I think it must have been a slip of tongue, but I meant July 1984.
Thank you very much for that clarification. So you said that the Gambia did not have capacity at the time to run a modern army. Could you explain the rationale behind giving Nigerians command responsibility, as you understood the situation, of course?
Certainly, I think I was not a party to the decisions to contract the Nigerians to come and command the army. But I think in my own level, at my own level, I felt that the political masters then perceive that, raising an army needs mature guidance. And in the absence of seasoned officers at the local level, then Nigeria, having gone through similar colonial rule and then had a similar administration and a similar doctrine for running an army, became a natural, partner and ally that we can resort to, and then probably see us through that interim time until such a time that Gambian officers could be trained and then guided through to assume their national duties as commanders of a sovereign armed forces.
Thank you very much, Mr. Witness. But help us here. Prior to the arrival of the Nigerians, didn't we have Gambians in these particular positions, which the Nigerians came to assume later?
I think I did state that Colonel Ndaunjai, who I understand was a career police officer following the 1981 events, was appointed as the commander of the Gambia National Army. So yes, we had some security personnel, but certainly not army qualified personnel. So the process of recruiting, training, and equipping an army, takes some time if you are to do it properly. So that not only is the officer supposed to be intelligent, educated, but he also must have some maturity, because an army is not any other institution. We manage violence, and therefore you need to have stable and reliable and dependable commanders who are mature and who understand the national situation to make sure that, you know, they guide the young soldiers and officers maturely for continuing.